This is just to really take you through some of the key findings from where kids aged 11 to 16 are on this issue and their parents. And I think we also ought to reflect on the teaching profession themselves. Just as an aside, I mean, we are here in the run-up to a general election, which is an opinion pollster, I have to call myself out at this moment in the schedule of politics, is probably closer, certainly, than anything. I joined the company in 1987, that it's about as close as 1992, I would suggest. And there are all sorts of precedents to show that it's almost impossible for David Cameron to get a majority, or indeed for the Labour people who are left, for Ed Miliband to do so. So whatever happens will be record-breaking. But one key difference between the time when Labour had a huge majority in 1997 and now is how important the public sees education. And I think that's an interesting backdrop. You could argue that in a globalised world, with more competition more easily from more places than ever, education becomes more and more important. I run a company now of 1,000 or so people in London, which is part of a global business, and I constantly move graduate level jobs out of London, and they go to Delhi, Singapore, Shanghai, where the young people there have identical computers to my graduates. They have the same Dell computers, they have the same software, and the challenge for the people in London is to do something better and different at the wages that they want to earn to live in one of the most expensive cities on earth, with a standard of living that they aspire to, that their friends and colleagues in Delhi and Shanghai cannot do. And it's interesting in that context, I think, that in 1997, partly because of both the Liberal Democrats and Labour in opposition, 50% roughly of the public thought education was the biggest problem facing Britain. 50%. The figure today is about 13%. And one thing I would say to everybody, whether you're in politics or you're interested in education, in the run-up to the election, many of us in this room might hope that there would be more debate and more salience attached to education. Anyway, the lesson is over. So in terms of where parents are, when you talk about a degree-level apprentice and framing and how we describe apprenticeship and how we describe things is hugely, hugely important. More of them think that that would be a good thing for a young person to have than actually a standard degree, 34% to 21%. So degree-level apprenticeships sound good. 55% of 11 to 16-year-olds say they're interested in one. The challenge is that if they go home and discuss it with their parents, and to be honest, they're going to get more information and influence potentially from their parents than they are from school over this. 56% of parents say they think a university degree will be better than an apprenticeship, if it's just put like that. So I think that's hugely important. Only 31% of kids report that teachers have discussed the idea of an apprenticeship with them. 44% say they haven't. And when we ask about careers advice, and again, I'm sure we can have a big debate about the state of careers advice in Britain today, only 8% of parents would rate careers advice being provided in schools today as good, 14% would rate it as poor, and a lot, frankly, just say, I know or see too little of it to be able to judge. But I do think, and we've touched on it, and somebody picked on Ed Miliband over talking about for those whom an academic route isn't available or isn't possible or isn't sensible or isn't desired. We do have this cultural problem. Class matters in Britain. One of the most striking and depressing things I've done in my 27 years at Ipsos Mori was another piece of work for the Sutton Trust, which looked at how much kids enjoy school. And one of the most depressing things I found, looking at the population as a whole, is basically for every bit you're more working class or more middle class, the more you either enjoyed school or disliked school or had a miserable time at school. And the fact that, that's such a strong correlation with social class, I think is hugely, hugely challenging. And so, how do we talk about these things? And that is something that will need huge attention. We're going to need to really, we have to reframe the language. There's lots that's hugely appealing about apprentice-level degrees. And when you talk to kids who are thinking of going to university, half of them are worried about fees. It's overwhelming, and how are they going to pay off the loans? For those not planning to go to university, who are a minority, but we know that more of them won't go than want to go, of many who want to go won't actually make it. The key issues are about the need to earn money, and the more working class you are, of course, the more likely you are to mention that. Wanting to do something practical. So there are huge positives here, but we have a long way to go. We are so riven with tradition, which is one of the few things that unites all Britons. 78% of us say tradition is one of the greatest things about this country. It doesn't matter if you're young, old, rich or poor. And some of that is embedded inside how we think about education. So I think there's just a huge amount to change in our heads, let alone in terms of what we're actually offering in institutions. The end. Thank you.